What's up, y'all? My name's Leticia, and you're listening to Confessions from the Closet, a podcast all about vulnerability and overcoming. It's time we get ourselves unstuck from these boxes and these closets that we've allowed ourselves to be trapped in. We're so much bigger than these boxes we've been in. It's time we go deep, y'all. What's up, y'all? Welcome back to another week of Confessions from the Closet. I'm excited about this week's episode. We have been following each other for, we think, like at least 5 years. We're not sure. But I'm joined this week by my friends from Instagram, Jordan and Haleigh, who have started a new company this last week called the Proud Love Collective. So we're going to get to hear about their story, their stories individually, their stories together, and how they came to start this new Proud Love Collective. So thank y'all for joining me.
Thank you. We're really excited to be here.
Yeah. So first thing I always like to start with is, when did you come to know Jesus?
Sure. I'll answer first and then you can answer.
That's fine.
So I grew up in the church. My dad is actually a music pastor, and so grew up in church setting. So I think I was probably 6 or 7 years old, really, really young. Mm-hmm. And so, I just grew up in that environment and didn't know anything else. So,
yeah.
Same for me. My dad's a pastor. So it wasn't ever like a specific moment for me that I came to know Jesus. Like people per se have like a God moment. It was just kind of, it was my life and my lifestyle. It's what we grew up with. So for me, it was always from birth, really.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, I was raised in the church too, so I understand. It's just like, it's my whole life. So growing up in the church, what were some things that you would hear about LGBTQ people?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. Honestly, it wasn't ever something that for me I ever saw displayed in front of me. Obviously, my family, I was very sheltered. We lived in the very Christian bubble. And so, I didn't know anyone who was gay. We didn't ever see anything on TV or, it wasn't as popular back then anyway to see it in mainstream media anyway. And so in that regard, didn't have a whole lot of exposure. But just as far as what we were taught growing up, I mean, I'm sure it's the same as a lot of people who grew up in the church that, being a gay is a sin, or, the big A word, abomination. And I remember whenever Ellen DeGeneres was in the media for the first time talking, when she came out, and I remember my family's reaction. I was really little, but I just remember even them picking up on their reactions of like, oh my God, that's so disgusting, and just, those types of conversations. But from a religious aspect, obviously it was always, it's a sin, it's an abomination. And to my family, they thought it was disgusting. So,
yeah. Same for me. I feel like pretty much across the board as religion goes, it's all the same. But it was never a thing even spoken of in our home for sure. But if it was ever something that we saw out, or I actually, when I was in second grade, ended up having a best friend, and like her moms were gay. And so it was a thing of, like, it is not to be brought up in this house or spoken of. And obviously, like, you're not allowed to come to their house. They're not allowed to come to our home. Yeah. So just a lot of really just leave it unspoken. And if it's seen, turn your head, because it's disgusting and it's wrong.
Yeah. So then I love that you had a best friend who had two moms, because I always wonder what people think when they realize Apollo doesn't really hang out with anyone because he's 3. But we always wonder what people think, or if anything's said. She's very sheltered. We're like, we are selective with who she can hang out with. But I think that's awesome that you had a friend that had 2 moms. Which leads me into my next question, which was, when did you know or start realizing that you were gay? And Haleigh, for you, did having a best friend with 2 moms like help show you that it was a possibility to have a family?
At that time, obviously, with what I was surrounded by, it was never even a thought in my mind. And I didn't even admit to myself. She's like laughing already. I didn't even admit to myself that I was gay until I had already been in a relationship with Jordan for like, what, a year and a half,
Almost
2 years.
Yeah.
And it's not that I didn't know, but again, the whole religious thing that comes along with it. And, you know, like maybe if I don't admit this to myself, I'm not going to hell. So it was quite the process, but looking back now, I am very thankful that I had that best friend, even at a very young age, to know that, even though I was suppressing all of those things and those feelings, that in a roundabout way, even at that young of an age, that was like a safety net for me to have that and to be able to watch them even from afar, obviously.
Yeah.
And it did come around to the point, like later years down the road, that we were allowed to go to their home. And for me, it was never like, I didn't ever feel like my parents felt or how the church had spoken of it. Like it just felt normal to me and right. And I never looked at it as a way of like, oh, this is a big, bad, scary thing.
Yeah.
It was actually very beautiful and helpful. So
I love that.
Yeah. For me, my situation was a little different. So obviously everything's clear in retrospect. So now when I look back at my life, I can see these patterns of, even at a young age, I was always really drawn to women, even though I didn't have the language or even to know, you know, like, oh, I might be gay, you know, like, especially growing up, because like I said, we didn't have that modeled in front of us at all. And so, but now looking back, I can always see that I was always drawn to women, just even in an innocent way. And then as I got older and got into high school, I actually got into a relationship with an older woman, actually from the time I was in high school. And that relationship lasted for almost 10 years. Not a good relationship. Had to do a lot of work surrounding that whole situation. But it was through all of that and kind of healing from that relationship that I started, you know, asking myself the question, like, okay, I actually really might be gay. And, you know, that sounds like an obvious question that you would ask yourself after being in a relationship with a woman for 10 years.
Yeah.
But again, I was just so separated from the LGBTQ community and so isolated that even after I had lived and been in a relationship for so long, it still wasn't on my mental radar to start actually asking myself those questions. And so finally I did. And I was, you know, getting some counseling and getting some help. And I remember I had a counselor ask me one day, she was just like, well, do you think you might be gay? And it was the most profound question. So silly to say that, but for me, it was. And then it just kind of opened this door of like, oh, okay, well, this is making more sense. And so just then started on that process of, okay, what does this look like for me? What does this look like, you know, with my faith and what I've been taught, and just kind of then jump started that whole process. And then I've obviously, by the time she and I met, I was already well into that journey. And then you were just you were not. You jumped on that train after we had already been together for a while. But yeah, it's been quite the journey and quite the process.
I think it's crazy to me that you both went through the same thing. Like Haley's saying that it took a couple years of being with you to be like, okay, maybe I am gay. And you did the same thing. Like it didn't ever connect. You were just in this safe place. Or, I mean, you said it wasn't a great relationship, but obviously for 10 years you felt comfortable enough. Because Maddie and I were going on like, this is 8 years. So that's a long time. Did you, so Jordan, since you didn't realize, when did you come out? Like you didn't realize in the relationship. So did your family know you were with her for 10 years?
I think they always kind of had suspicions. I don't know how you really couldn't. But it was very much don't ask, don't tell. That's kind of the Southern culture anyway. And then very much my family's default setting. And so I think they just thought if we don't acknowledge this, then it's not actually happening. But I actually, I had gone on a year-long mission trip. That's actually where we met. We were both missionaries overseas for a year. And so it was actually while I was overseas, I actually got the courage to finally come out to my parents and tell them, like, look, I had been in this relationship for this, for the past however many years, and, I'm gay. And I think because I had the buffer of being overseas and being, where they couldn't immediately reach me if they needed to with their poor reaction or whatever it was going to be, I felt safer being able to do it in that way. And so their initial reaction wasn't great. But again, I had all this time. I still wasn't going to be, having to see them for another 6 months or so. And so that kind of quelled everything a little bit. And I think for them, they just thought, again, if we don't talk about this or acknowledge it when she gets home, that it doesn't actually exist.
Yeah.
So I actually ended up having to come out to my family, I think probably about 3 times before they actually
definitely at least 3 times
before they actually got it. And then it really set in. And it was obviously after she and I were already together and they could see, like, okay, this isn't going away. And that's whenever it was like real. They were like, oh, and then it was like the real reaction that, the one that everyone dreads is, the reaction. So,
how it's going to be.
Yeah.
And for you,
so
Haleigh?
For me, I didn't get to, per se, come out on my own. My sister outed us. So it was a different process for me because I didn't get to do it on my own. It was done for me. And it was actually really horrible. So my process was, in a moment of when I was actually in a situation of I was in my parents' home. I was outed. And so just having to go through all that with my dad being a pastor and things like that. So it was kind of done for me, unfortunately.
Yeah. So you were still living at home, which I didn't have to go through that. I was already out of the house living on my own. Was that harder? Did you have to move out? How was that response for you?
So do you want me to answer that question?
You're wanting to say something.
No, go ahead. No, you can answer that question, then I'll follow up with that.
I don't know that I would say it's harder one way or the other. Just because, everyone's journey is different. Everyone's experience is different. And at the end of the day, for many of us, it's really hard. But for being at home and being under their roof and with my dad being a pastor and us, even then I was still very, very involved in the church. It was very much a thing that I was not welcome in their home anymore. And, of course, they had to say all the right things, that they would still love me no matter what. But the actions did not follow up with that at all. And we were definitely had to leave our churches. We lost our church community, our friend community, because our friend community was our church community. So we lost everyone and everything. And if you want to follow that up with what you're going to say.
Oh, no, I agree with what you said. Just, everyone's situation is, coming out's never necessarily easy.
Yeah.
But the fact that we both were still under our parents' roof, partially. But thankfully, we were very fortunate in that we were in the process of getting our own place anyway. And so just the timing and the way things fell, thankfully, we were able to get into our own home pretty quickly after things kind of blew up and hit the fan. So having that safe space was definitely important, because I don't know how we would have made it if we were, if we had been, a lot younger, maybe even in high school and things like that, having to deal with our parents still truly being our only means of support. And so we usually try to tell people when they ask us, about coming out and advice and things like that, we always try to tell people, make sure you have a safety net, whatever that means for you, make sure that your physical safety is most important, as well as your mental and emotional safety. And so we were fortunate that we did have a safe place to go to relatively soon after people knew about us. So
are y'all from the same town?
No, actually, she's from deep South Mississippi. And then I've been in the Nashville, Tennessee area for, 15 something years now. So we're still in Tennessee. She actually came and moved up to Nashville to live with me and my older brother. We actually all three got an apartment at the time, and which we're on our own now. But at the time, he was also trying to get his life started. And so we all three jumped in together and tried to figure it out. And it worked out.
It did. Our air mattress and 3 spoons.
Oh yeah, we had an air mattress and no furniture and literally.
But it worked, and we were together, so that's what mattered.
Yeah.
Yes, that's good. Which leads me really into the Proud Love Collective and how y'all started that. I have it open right now, and it talks about how y'all processed through. Can you have faith and can you be gay? And so y'all obviously did that together. What was that journey like, which led you into Proud Love Collective?
Yeah. So that process for us was, I think for me anyway, a lot harder than what I was anticipating.
Mm-hmm.
And I think a big portion of that had to do with the reactions that we were getting from the church and people that we trusted and that we had viewed as authority in our lives for so long.
Mm-hmm.
And so that the fact that there was such a dissonance between, these people that say that they love us and that they stand for, they stand on the pulpit on Sunday and speak as though it's the voice of God. And then yet they turn around and treat their children like this, And so for me, I had a really difficult time reconciling those two things. And for a while got really angry and was just like, I'm not going to have anything to do with any of this if this is what it's all really about.
Yeah.
But with that being said, we didn't, or I'm not going to say we, because our processes, they were similar, but they were different.
I was going to say, it's pretty much, it's the same.
Eventually got to the point where I wasn't satisfied just saying, forget all of this. Like you can't have your whole life be structured around faith and God and this relationship with God. And then all of a sudden just say, forget it all. And then immediately be okay with that. And I liked, to tell myself that I could, but, at the end of the day, I was never peaceful about it. And so we just went through this huge journey of re-examining everything that we had ever been taught growing up.
Literally everything.
Like, what have I been taught about God? Who is that God? What do I think about that God? And how does that affect what I think about myself? And unpacking that. And then same thing for the Bible. What have I been taught about the Bible? What do I really think about that myself? And how is that impacting how I move forward with my life as a gay person, and just step by step kind of unpacking some of that. And it was a really messy, difficult process. And there were days where we felt like completely lost. And so now that we've obviously moved through that process and have come to more of a place of peace as far as just what we believe and what we, feel for ourselves, looking back, we said how much we wish we could go back to those younger versions of ourselves and have those conversations, to kind of help you get from point A to point B. Because when your entire faith is crumbling and you've lost all your support and everything that you've had as your life raft from the time you were born, when all of that crumbles and you are looking for any sort of direction, any sort of support, anybody to say, hey, you know what? I remember when I felt like that, and there is a light at the end of the tunnel. And here are some stepping stones that I took to get to that point. Because when you're at the beginning of that, you can't, think or see your way out of it sometimes. So for us, Proud Love Collective was just a way for us to hopefully give back to the community in a way of like, here's what we wish we would have had when we were in our darkest points of this process. And to hopefully help spare you some of the, difficulty that we went through on a spiritual level and a personal level, but then also just on a practical level, some of the things that we learned about coming out and how to have those conversations in a safe way, how to have boundaries and protect your mental health and your emotional health.
Or
and
who even to have those conversations with.
Yeah, who and how and when. And obviously there's not any hard and fast rules per se, but just it's always helpful, I think, to hear from other people who have been through it, and to say, here's what worked for us, here's what didn't, at least, just to kind of give people some guidance. So that's kind of where Proud Love came from and where we're hoping to let it become. So.
Yeah, I think you covered that pretty well.
Good.
Yeah, I love that. So y'all have been together how many years now?
Almost 7.
Mm-hmm. It'll be 7 in October.
Awesome. Are y'all still in contact with your families? How's that been?
No. So I have an older brother, and he is probably the only one. I say probably. He is the only one on my side of the family that is cool with everything. He loves Haleigh, loves us, thinks that we're great. But other than that, everyone else in the family has not come around. And so just for myself, we've kind of created a boundary. They put up a wall, but then we've also created a boundary for ourselves as far as, it's not healthy or safe for us to continue to allow certain conversations to happen. For a while, I felt like it was my responsibility to allow my family to say whatever they felt like they needed to say about it as a way to try to, turn us back to the Lord or whatever they thought they were doing. And for a while, I felt like I had to keep the door open to have those conversations and hope that, eventually they would see that, no, we're okay and we're in a good place and we're...
That they would come around.
Yeah, that they would come around. But leaving that door open for us, at least at this stage in our lives, wasn't beneficial, wasn't safe or healthy for us to continue to allow. And so we don't have any contact with my side of the family or definitely your side either. It's just out of safety for ourselves. So with my family, we don't have any contact with them whatsoever, just out of safety. And it just got to a point where leaving that door open was causing more harm on our end than good. And so for now, we have, they've made it clear to us that they don't want us together as a couple. They don't acknowledge us as a couple. They don't want the kids to see us together, all of that kind of stuff. And so, and then we had gotten, just some negative messages and conversations and all that. So it just got to the point where it was just safer and healthier for us to also put up that boundary and to say, we love them. We send them love. We send them light. If they're going to ever come around, it will have to be because they do their own work and not because we're the ones to make that change happen, just because it's not helpful for us to try to be the ones to facilitate that process. So,
right. And I think it's not our job to do that. Like, it's too much weight for us to be the ones that are doing all the work, even if it's about faith. You can't teach someone something like they really need to do the work themselves about any part. Like, y'all deconstructing the faith to reconcile, yes, I can love the Lord and I am loved by God and I can love Haleigh and I can love Jordan. Like, that's your personal work and nobody can do that for you but yourself.
Exactly.
Which is important.
Exactly.
Because you have to want to.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I think a lot, like, that's part of the thing behind the podcast is a lot of people don't understand, each story is different. We each have our own journey of how we came out, how we reconciled that. Some people have lost faith completely in this community because of the trauma and have no interest in it. We all have such different stories, which was, it was the driving force to find different people because I want to educate, not just help people in the LGBTQ community to educate straight people, straight Christians, to say, like, look at this is all different stories we have to go through, all different journeys, and yet our faith is still so important to us, but so is our health and our safety. One thing I wanted to ask is, what were some of the things that y'all did that helped y'all realize that you are loved by God? Or some things that helped with that journey?
Yeah. For me, I became like a sponge for any sort of material that was progressive in nature as far as Christian faith is concerned. I didn't even know that the progressive Christian movement was even a thing. I was very sheltered from that. And so I literally started, this is going to sound hilarious, but I lived in Nashville at the time. And I remembered reading or hearing something once upon a time that Carrie Underwood, of all people, had gone to a church in Nashville that was a gay affirming church, and that Carrie Underwood had gotten all this hell about the fact that her church was a gay church. And so I literally Googled Carrie Underwood Gay Church Nashville just as a way to try to find anything that was helpful for us, or a safe space, because we didn't have a church at the time. We were missing that piece of our life. And so we were just looking for anything. And so that's literally, I Googled that. And then stumbled upon, there's a great church here in Nashville called Grace Point Church in Nashville. And they had a lot of wonderful resources. They were a mega church here in Nashville that back in 2015 or 2016 announced that they were going to be a gay affirming church. It was one of the first in the area to do that. And obviously it was this whole big, they got national media attention over it because people obviously threw a fit about it. And, you know, they lost half their congregation and started from scratch. And so they were putting out all of this media and content and sermons, basically explaining why we feel led to do this, you know, what their process had been to get to that point. And so it was really great because it kind of was mirroring what our process needed to be, of like, how did they get from step A to B to C to D to, you know, work their way through this. And so I just became like a sponge, and I would listen to, like,
I was going to say, all of Stan, the pastor at the time,
all of the podcasts. I would listen to 4 or 5 podcasts a day. I was, you know, learning just anyone that I could get my hands on that was, you know, remotely progressive. And then finding people like Brene Brown, who doesn't speak necessarily about religious aspect of things so much, but she does talk about shame and, you know, your own personal identity and accepting yourself. And, you know, it just was like one thing snowballed into the next. But really just that whole progressive Christian conversation was like a light at the end of the tunnel for us. Because it let me know that there were people out there that had all these same questions that I had had for a long time, you know, of why do we say that we believe this, you know, but all the questions you could never really ask in that environment. When we stepped outside of it, we realized, no, there's a lot of people like us out there. We just didn't know.
We didn't know it was a thing.
That we all existed. So we found some refuge in that group of people. So
do y'all still go there?
No, we don't. We actually live outside of Nashville now. We're in the Chattanooga area, so we don't, but we do still listen to a lot of their stuff from time to time, and it has been really helpful to us. And and then again, just like finding people like you guys, you know, like I said, it was just like one thing led to the next.
Just led like one to the next, and just finding our people.
And I will say too, something else that was helpful for me, and I know this isn't necessarily the case for everyone, but there was a time in my process where I found myself still looking for direction from some of the same voices that I had looked to before my coming out process. So some of the, you know, big names in the Christian culture that I had, you know, that had been spiritual authorities in my life for so long, it was hard for me to continue to receive from them while I was juggling, figuring out what I believe. You know, so some of those mainstream Christian names, I went through a process where I actually had to shut some of that out for a little bit.
Like disconnect from every bit of it.
While I was figuring out what I was believing, because it felt like I was getting mixed signals, you know. It's like, you're saying all of this, but I know that if I were to try to show up at your church and be in leadership, you wouldn't let me, you know. And so I just, all of that dissonance, it was too much. And so for me, it was actually really helpful for me I did like a clean sweep of my social media and all of these influences that I had been following, even though they were good Christian influences, you know. I did a clean sweep, and it
was no longer healthy.
It wasn't helpful or healthy, and it wasn't ever going to, at least for me, provide me the peace that I was needing as far as how do I reconcile these things? How do I build something that feels right for me? And so that was actually really helpful, just to kind of clean out some of those older influences.
Yeah.
And I started rebuilding with people who were saying and preaching and allowing a bigger table, you know, a more inclusive worldview. And it was actually a really beautiful thing.
Yeah. I mean, because you have to think, like, even halfway through our journey, we were still trying to be involved in the church, and we had visited this other church in Nashville that was a quote affirming church. But when it came down to it and we actually wanted to step into leadership, they were like, oh, you can be here, but you can't be in leadership. So even like having to cut people like that out that were, you know, they claimed to be affirming, but only to a certain extent.
Yeah.
So
it was helpful for us just to kind of make the distinction of, there's a whole group of people, a whole movement of Christian people who are, you know, building something that's inclusive, and that's what we wanted to be a part of, and that's what we knew would be most helpful to us, versus trying to find something from the old that we knew would never, they didn't have the capacity to give us. And so it was helpful for us just to make that distinction and move forward. So
have y'all seen the stuff with I'm gonna mess up his last name, but Stephen Furtick, is that how you say it, from Elevation Worship? I always mess up his last. Have y'all seen the video that's going around now on TikTok? No. It's like he's talking about context, and then he talks about gay people. It's like, it's a whole sermon, and I haven't watched the whole thing, but I've just seen like the clip. And because they're involved with Bethel and they're involved with other big mega churches, I have my wall up because I'm like, I love their music. I am on the worship team, and when I get to choose songs, I will choose a lot of their songs. I love just the songs that they're putting out. But I still have my wall up because I'm like, you're saying this and it's making it look like you're affirming, but would you let someone like me be on your worship team? Probably not, because I'm not as talented as their musicians. That too, but
stop.
Their musicians are amazing. But also, I'm married to a woman, so there's that too. And so I'm just
minor
like,
detail.
Are you trying to open this door and look more hip and cool, or do you really? One of my questions is, did your kid come out? Did one of your kids come out? And that's changing your heart, because that's always, if you have more than one kid. Be careful what you say about, be careful. That's what me and Monty always say. Don't judge someone else's kid, because then you're going to end up with a kid like that. I judged kids at Walmart, and now I have the Walmart kid. So, like, you got to be careful. But that was like my question, because I'm like, well, did one of his kids come out? Is he truly affirming? Because these are things, I would love to go to any worship concert or any, conference, but then it's like, but what's going to happen like midway? Like, it's happened recently, to us, and it was shocking because it doesn't happen to us anymore. And we go to a church that doesn't claim to be affirming, and that's because it's a church for everyone. And so putting that label on it was hard for our pastor, who, we just recently lost, but I've been on the worship team for 5 years. So it's like that affirming label, what does it even mean? if you're not actually
the action. Yeah.
Lead.
The
Yeah.
action.
Where our church does the action, but doesn't have the label. And that's what's important is the action.
That's what really matters. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, we hadn't seen that video. And that's what I mean when I say we've cut out a lot of that influence just because it was hard for us to, you know, continue to allow a certain level of authority in our life if something that was so crucial for us.
And he was actually one of the biggest people that I followed that I ended up having to cut out.
Yeah. So hopefully, I mean, maybe he is, like you said, maybe something has happened that has made him reevaluate. That would be really great. But I do also know that, like you said, it could be trendy, the trendy thing.
Right? Yeah.
To, you know, because the culture's changing and, you know, so I hope it's for the right reasons regardless. So,
yeah. And it was 1946, the documentary, who shared it. That's where, and I kept seeing it from other like people I follow on TikTok. It wasn't actually them that posted that little clip. Somebody found it, somebody shared it. But still, I think we're all the people in that community that have shared it. Or if you go to the comment section, we're like, but what's the full context of what he's saying? You know? And it's a sad reality, I think, for a lot of us that have been traumatized, and we do have walls up because we're like, is this real? Is this Jesus's love, or is this you trying to get more people in your door, and in turn you're going to cause more trauma?
Right.
I wish it wasn't that way. I wish that we didn't have to have that fear and that. Am I going to be accepted here in this restaurant? You know, let alone church.
Right. Exactly.
So, I love that y'all have started the Proud Love Collective, and I've gone on your website and read a bunch of different stuff that y'all have posted, stuff on Instagram. If you're not following them yet on Instagram, I will add the links in the video comment section and on the Apple Podcast comment section, or notes section, I guess it's called. Have y'all, I know y'all reached out to me on Instagram a long time ago. That's kind of how we got connected. Have y'all experienced some of the same stuff?
As far as
like different kids that are coming out or they're going through their journey.
Oh,
because y'all's posts are amazing and your life is beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, we it was kind of funny. So we've been getting, you know, messages here and there for years now, just because we got to a point where we were started to be very open on our personal social media pages, just as, you know, a way for us to, you know, be ourselves. If we were a straight couple, we wouldn't think twice about posting our engagement photos or, you know what I mean? And so we just started taking that step of being more open with our personal lives for several years now. And so we would get messages here and there from people from all over, you know, saying, hey, you know, have followed you guys for a long time. Thank you for being open with your lives. Here's what I'm going through. Like, I think I'm gay and I don't know how to handle that. Or, and so we would get those messages and, you know, try to
like started being like more and more and more and more. And we're like, okay, we have to do something about this.
And I have been talking about Proud Love Collective. We have for years, and
literally
even before,
probably since before you knew me, you were talking about stuff like this, because as soon as we even started dating, it was like one of the first things out of your mouth in one of our first dates.
I remember saying, I wish there was a place that we could all go and talk about these things, because we can't be the only ones. And so it's been something that I've been wanting to do for a long time, but as these messages just, you know, have continued to come in, we just finally feel like, okay, like
now is the time.
We need to put this together. We need to actually start, you know, being more vocal with what our goal for this is, and to actually really start putting out some material that can really help people on a larger scale, you know, because we can only get so many messages and respond so quickly. And, you know, so we wanted to make it a bigger thing, that a community could come together and support each other, and not just us two. I mean, because we're just two normal people and we're just offering our experience, but that, you know, but when you can get like a collective group of voices together, kind of echoing some of the same things, that's really beautiful. So our goal for this, obviously right now we've got the Facebook and the Instagram pages are live. And so we're trying to post helpful material on those just as a, a free resource. And then what we're working on right now is actually an online mentorship program and a private, safe Facebook group. And so our hope with that is to have a structured, safe environment where we can actually walk through some of these issues, the big questions like, what do I believe about God? Here's what I was taught, and I'm trying to figure out what I believe now. And then how does that play into my sexuality? And not in a way of like telling people, here's what you should think, because that's not helpful. But here's a safe space for you to ask those questions and to hear from other people who are also on that path, and just kind of some of those stair steps that were helpful for us walking through those. So that's kind of our goal with the mentorship program, and that will be coming out in September. We'll start generating some more information about that. So that's the overall goal, is just to create a safe community where we can all kind of support each other through all of this. So
I love that.
Yeah.
And one of the things on your website says coming out can be hard for LGBTQIA+. I did it. Christians, it can be even harder. There's a lot of letters.
There's a lot of letters. We've got a long acronym.
Yeah. And just, I love that you're creating a space. It says coming out can be hard, and you shouldn't have to go through it alone, because it is scary, especially in a Christian community. I think it's scary for a lot of people, but with that background, it's even harder. And so I appreciate and love that y'all are doing that.
Thank you.
And helping. Yeah. It's great.
Yeah. I mean, because it's true. Coming out is hard, can be hard across the board. But when you have that extra layer of the religious aspect, and it doesn't even have to just be Christianity, like a fundamentalist religious background, regardless, creates a layer within yourself of, probably some shame and fear, and outside of the fear of the external reaction. What are people going to say? What are people going to think? All of that comes along with coming out, period. But the inner, am I okay? Am I sinful? Does God love me? Like, that's an extra layer that if you didn't grow up with a religious background, you don't necessarily maybe have that, or at least to the depth that some of us have, where we didn't know how to separate our personal identities from the identity of the church and what the church had taught us of how we were supposed to think and act and be. And, so just kind of reclaiming that sense of self is an extra layer in the coming out process that I think is unique for our community. And that's something that we wanted to create a space for, to address specifically.
Yeah. That's good. I've read before, like, I'm going to mess it up, but whenever you're in the closet your whole life, you're hiding parts of yourself. And then when you come out, you're trying to realize what parts are actually me and what parts aren't, because we spent so much time hiding who we are, and we don't know who we are once we get there. And that's, I mean, me and Molly got married really quickly. So I did a lot of that processing as a newlywed, and it was hard to be like, wait, I was still questioning, can I be married and can I be gay? And is God watching my every move? And just all kinds of, like, I look back and I'm like, whoa, like, how did we survive all that craziness that was going through my head, And it's a hard process, and you can even be out and you can be in a relationship, you can be married, and you're still processing through all those things, even though you're happy, even though you're in a safe place. It's years of built up conversation in your head that maybe you never even had with a person, but you put it on yourself. So I think it's going to help a lot of people. And I just feel like we're both trying to do the same thing in different ways. I love it. And it's great. And so if y'all haven't gone, go follow them. If you're someone who's struggling to come out, they have this amazing opportunity for people to connect. And I just highly encourage that if you have a story to share, to go there and help other people, because we shouldn't do this alone, and it is scary stepping out and being a voice to try to help make this change. But I think it's so needed in this culture right now. And with all the negativity we see on social media right now, and the back and forth and this and that and the sides, I think just love in general and helping and holding hands and doing this together is so needed and so important. So thank you all again for this.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Is there anything that I did not cover that y'all wanted to share before we wrap this up?
I think so. I think if there's anything that you need us to cover more or say differently, let us know. But I don't have anything off the top of my head.
Yeah. I can't think of anything. I mean, really, I feel like we touched a lot. So thank y'all. Thank y'all for your time and for getting on here with all the little glitches we had along the way.
Thank you. And we appreciate very much what you guys are doing with this podcast. It's definitely so needed. And we agree, there's a huge sea of voices that are actually we're all saying some of the very similar things. We just, have been kind of dispersed or maybe hadn't been connected or whatever. So I feel like it's great to finally see that this community is coming together. So thank you for what you guys do.
Yeah, thank y'all. So if you're watching, please go follow them. Please like and subscribe. I will definitely link up everything that we've talked about. And I appreciate everyone watching and listening, coming back every week and going on this crazy journey with us. So until next time, have a great one.
Hey guys, thanks for listening to my mom's podcast. Be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, and give this video a big thumbs up. Also, thanks for your comments and your feedback. Hey guys, thanks. Hey guys, thanks for listening to my podcast.